On August 2nd, 1867, the mood was grim at the foot of the Bighorn Mountains in present-day Wyoming. A small group of soldiers found themselves cut off and surrounded by hundreds of mounted Lakota warriors. Less than 8 months earlier, just 3 miles away, these same warriors had killed Captain William Fetterman and his entire 80-man command. Now, history threatened to repeat itself. With nowhere to run, some of the men removed their shoes and prepared to fight using loops tied with their shoelaces, allowing them to fire their rifles with their feet. Survival, not capture, was the only goal. The soldiers' only advantage that day lay in their firepower and 14 wagon boxes. Leading them was 36-year-old Captain James Powell, a man whose story had nearly been lost to history. Known for his illiteracy, coarse language, and courage, Powell had enlisted as a teenager and fought in the final stages of the Mexican War. He spent much of the 1850s in the cavalry, eventually rising to first sergeant. During the Civil War, he received a commission in the 18th U.S. Infantry, fought in nearly every major battle in the Western Theater, and survived multiple gunshot wounds at the Battle of Jonesboro, though 2 bullets remained lodged in his chest for life. By late 1866, Powell had returned to active duty at Fort Phil Kearny, where Red Cloud's war was in full swing. The fort faced constant harassment from native warriors, particularly attacks on woodcutting parties. Powell had already seen the devastating consequences of these attacks, having helped recover the remains of Fetterman's destroyed command in December 1866. By the summer of 1867, Powell commanded a reorganized Company C, 27th Infantry. They were stationed at a remote outpost known as the Pinery, a few miles west of Fort Phil Kearny. Here, 14 wagon boxes were placed in an oval to serve as a makeshift corral. Powell assigned men to guard the woodcutters and escort wagons, leaving 26 soldiers and 4 civilians at the corral, including his second-in-command, First Lieutenant John Jennis. On the morning of August 2nd, Private Sam Gibson, only 18, spotted hostile warriors approaching. The attackers, primarily Lakota, had initially planned to overwhelm the soldiers using tactics that had worked against Fetterman. However, Powell's men now wielded new breech-loading Springfield rifles, capable of firing 5 to 6 times faster than the older muskets. As the warriors advanced, the soldiers quickly took positions behind the wagon boxes. Max Littman provided covering fire. Private Thomas Doyle and others occupied gaps between boxes, and Captain Powell directed operations from a few wagons to the west. Despite being outnumbered, the soldiers were well-trained and determined. The first mounted charge was repelled by the deadly accuracy of the new rifles, leaving many attackers wounded. Yet the Lakota adapted, dismounting to use the terrain to their advantage. The battle inside the corral was brutal. Soldiers endured gunfire, smoke, and the stench of ignited debris. Injured men continued to fight. Private Henry Haggerty operated his rifle with one hand after being shot through the shoulder. Lieutenant Jennis was killed instantly, and others sustained serious wounds. Water became essential, and men risked their lives to retrieve kettles while under fire. For nearly 4 hours, Powell's small command withstood wave after wave of attacks. Help finally arrived in the form of Major Ben Smith, who led a quick reaction force of 100 soldiers with a mountain howitzer. Cannon fire dispersed the warriors and reassured Powell's men that relief was near. When the reinforcements arrived, the survivors received whiskey from the post surgeon, and their bravery was recognized with medals. Casualties among Powell's men were relatively light, 3 dead and 2 wounded at the corral, plus 3 dead at the site camp. Estimates suggest the Lakota and Cheyenne suffered roughly 60 dead and 120 wounded, though numbers vary. The Wagon Box Fight marked a turning point. The federal government realized it would be cheaper to negotiate peace than continue the conflict. In 1868, another treaty was signed at Fort Laramie, and forts along the Bozeman Trail were abandoned. Red Cloud had won, one of the rare victories for a native tribe against the U.S. Army. After the fight, Powell retired from active service due to his war wounds, eventually settling in Peoria, Illinois. Some of his men continued military service, while others returned to civilian life. Powell was not killed in combat, but he had risked everything for his country. He spent his final years at home and passed away in 1903, remembered as a soldier who fought courageously in one of the American West's most legendary battles.